My name is Ethan Hale, and I'm 32 years old. This is the story I've never told anyone. I call it, my boss's daughter called me to her home and said, "Come inside, I will show you something." It was a Thursday night. One of those nights when the city feels half asleep, the streets quiet, the air heavy with the scent of rain that never quite arrived. I just wrapped up a late meeting at the architecture firm where I'd been grinding away for nearly 7 years. The office lights had gone dim long ago, but my boss, Richard Bennett, was still pacing around his glass-walled corner office, barking last-minute instructions on a call. Richard was complicated, brilliant but merciless, the kind of man who could make or break your career with a single glance. I'd spent years proving myself to him, working late, sacrificing weekends, dating less, living less, all because I wanted that promotion he dangled in front of me like a carrot. And then there was her, Lila Bennett, his daughter. I met her once at a company Christmas party 2 years ago. She had this effortless grace, dark hair, a sharp laugh, and a way of looking right at you, like she could see through all the masks you wore for the world. Back then, she was just the boss's daughter, a figure you tread lightly around, someone from a different orbit. So when my phone buzzed that Thursday night, and her name flashed across my screen, my heart skipped. Ethan? Her voice was soft but steady. Lila? Hey, hi. What's up? There was a pause, long enough for me to hear her breathing. Are you free tonight? I blinked at my reflection in the darkened office window. Yeah, I just left work. Why? Another pause. Then, can you come by my place? There's something I need to show you. I didn't know what to say. The rational part of me screamed that this was a bad idea. She was my boss's daughter. But there was something in her tone. Not playful, not casual. Urgent. Fragile. Sure, I heard myself say. Text me the address. By the time I pulled up outside her house, the city had swallowed the last traces of daylight. The Bennetts lived in one of those stately old homes on the edge of town, the kind with ivy creeping up the brick and a wrought iron gate that looked like it belonged in a different century. I sat in my car for a moment, my fingers drumming against the steering wheel, rehearsing what I might say or not say. What if Richard found out? What if this was a mistake? Before I could think my way out of it, the front door creaked open. Lila stepped out, barefoot on the porch, her hair falling loose over her shoulders. She wasn't dressed up, just a faded t-shirt and jeans. But there was something about the way she stood there, arms crossed, like she'd been waiting all night. Ethan, she called softly, her voice cutting through the thick evening air. I got out of the car, the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes sounding too loud. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Her eyes held mine, searching, unreadable. Then she opened the door wider and said the words that would anchor themselves in my memory forever. Come inside. I'll show you something. The house was warm but strangely quiet. I expected to hear her father's booming voice somewhere, or the clinking of glasses from her stepmother in the kitchen. But it was empty, eerily so. Your parents aren't home? I asked, stepping carefully over the Persian rug in the foyer. They're away for the weekend, she said almost too quickly. It's just us. Just us. The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. I followed her into the living room, my eyes scanning the space. Family portraits on the walls, shelves of books, a fire that had burned low in the hearth. She didn't sit. She just stood by the mantel, fiddling with a silver pendant around her neck. You must think this is weird, she said finally, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. A little, I admitted, because lying felt impossible in that moment. But you sounded like you needed something. She exhaled, almost a laugh but not quite. I do. Her voice cracked slightly, and I noticed for the first time her hands were trembling. What's wrong? I asked, stepping closer. She turned, and for a second, the mask slipped. I can't talk to anyone else about this, she whispered. Not my father. Not my friends. No one. I should have left right then. Any sane man would have. But there was something in her eyes, a mix of fear and defiance, that made me stay. Then talk to me, I said, She led me down a hallway I didn't recognize, past closed doors, until we reached one at the very end. "This is what I wanted to show you," she said, her hand hovering over the brass handle. For a moment, she didn't move, like she was gathering the courage to open it. Then she turned it slowly, the hinges groaning as the door creaked inward. Inside was a room that felt wrong, dimly lit, curtains drawn, the smell of something stale in the air, like a place that hadn't been touched in years. In the center of the room sat a single wooden box on a table, old, scarred, the kind of thing you'd find in an attic. "What is this?" I asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "My mother's things." I frowned. "Your mother's?" "I thought. She died when I was 12, Lila said, her gaze fixed on the box. "My father never talks about her. Ever. This room, it's like it doesn't exist in this house. He told me to stay out of it." Her fingers brushed the lid of the box. "But tonight, couldn't. Not anymore." There was something electric in the air, a sense that I was standing on the edge of something bigger than I could see. She looked at me then, her voice almost breaking. "I need you to see it with me, please." I don't know why I nodded. Maybe because she looked like she'd shatter if I didn't. Maybe because I was already too deep. She opened the box. Inside were letters, photographs, a few pieces of jewelry. But beneath those, folded neatly, was something that made my chest tighten. A diary, its leather cover worn thin, the edges frayed like it had been opened 1,000 times. Lila picked it up with shaking hands. "This was hers," she whispered. She flipped it open, and the pages crackled softly. The handwriting was elegant but frantic in places, the ink smudged in others, as if tears had blurred the words. I leaned closer, reading over her shoulder, and that's when I saw it, the first line on the page. "If you're reading this, something is terribly wrong." Lila's fingers hovered over the fragile page, as if afraid her touch might erase the words. I felt the air grow heavier, like the whole room was holding its breath. "If you're reading this, something is terribly wrong." The sentence sat there, simple but loaded, the kind of line that could turn your stomach without even explaining why. "Do you know what she meant?" I asked quietly. Lila shook her head, her hair falling like a curtain around her face. "I don't. I barely remember her. She was sick a lot. Or at least that's what my father told me. But she never talked to me about it." She flipped to the next page, and her breath caught. The handwriting was rushed now, almost desperate. "Richard is lying. He's not who he says he is. If something happens to me, someone has to know the truth." I felt the back of my neck prickle. "Richard?" I said slowly. "Your father." Lila didn't look at me. She just kept turning pages, each one worse than the last. "He thinks I don't see what he's doing, but I do. He's dangerous when he's cornered. If you find this, Lila, forgive me for not telling you sooner." She stopped reading. The silence between us was deafening. I didn't know what to say. Every instinct told me to tread carefully. This wasn't just family drama. It was something darker, something that could shatter the world she lived in. "Do you think she meant?" "I don't know what to think." She cut me off, her voice trembling. "I just know I couldn't stay in that room anymore. Knowing this box was here. Knowing she wrote this and I never read it." Her eyes finally met mine, wide and searching. "Ethan, do you think my father could have done something to her?" The question hung there like a live wire. I should have said something reassuring. I should have told her she was overthinking. But instead, all I managed was, "I don't know. But these pages, they don't sound like the words of someone who just passed away peacefully." Lila closed the diary, clutching it to her chest like it might vanish. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked in the hallway. We both froze. "Is someone here?" I whispered. She shook her head. "No one's supposed to be. My father's out of town. He called me this morning from Chicago." But the sound came again, closer this time. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. "Stay here," I said instinctively, stepping out into the dark hallway. The house was silent again, but not the kind of silence that's peaceful, the kind that makes you feel like you're being watched. I moved slowly, scanning the shadows. Nothing. No one. When I came back, Lila was standing in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. "This house," she whispered. "Sometimes I feel like it doesn't belong to me anymore. Like I'm just visiting a place that's keeping secrets." Her voice cracked, and I could see how scared she was. Not just of the creak in the hallway, but of the diary in her hands, of what it meant for her family, for everything she thought she knew. We ended up in the kitchen, the two of us sitting at the counter like it was some kind of safe zone. She poured herself a glass of wine, her hand shaking as she set the bottle down. "Why me?" I asked finally. She looked up, confused. "You could have called anyone," I said. "A friend, a cousin. Why me?" She hesitated, her lips parting like she was about to say something but wasn't sure if she should. "Because," she said at last, "you don't look at me like I'm just his daughter." The words hit harder than I expected. There was something unspoken there, something I didn't dare name. "Lila?" I started, but stopped myself. For a long moment we just sat there, the air between us heavy with things unsaid. Then she slid the diary across the counter toward me. "Read it," she whispered. "All of it. I can't do it alone." I opened it again, flipping further this time. The words grew darker. "He told me not to ask questions. But how can I not? When there are nights he comes home smelling like smoke and fear. I've hidden copies of things, documents, photos. If you find this, look for the key." I stopped reading. "The key?" Lila leaned closer, her eyes searching mine. "What key?" she asked. I turned the diary toward her, tapping the last line we'd read. "She says she hid copies. But where? And what does she mean by the key?" Lila's gaze flicked toward the box we'd brought into the kitchen. "There was no key in there," she murmured. "Just letters, photos, jewelry." My mind started piecing things together. If there was a key, then there had to be something it opened. Something her mother didn't want Richard to find. Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the counter. She flinched, grabbing it quickly. I saw the name flash across the screen before she tilted it away. "Dad." She hesitated, then answered. "Hi." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the tension in it. I couldn't hear what he was saying on the other end, but I saw the way her face changed, her shoulders stiffening, her eyes darting toward me like she was suddenly aware of how close I was sitting. "Yeah, I'm home," she said. No one's here." A beat of silence. "Of course," she said. "I won't go into that room. I know what you said." When she hung up, her hand was shaking. "He knows," she whispered. I frowned. "Knows what?" "That I went in there. He always knows." The fear in her voice unsettled me more than anything else had that night. I wanted to tell her it was nothing, that her father couldn't possibly sense we'd opened that box. But even as I thought it, I wasn't sure I believed it, because deep down I could feel it too. This wasn't just about an old diary. It was about whatever her mother had left behind, and whatever Richard Bennett would do to keep it buried. The clock over the stove ticked past midnight, its sound unnervingly loud in the still kitchen. Lila hadn't said a word since hanging up the phone. She sat hunched over the counter, her fingers drumming softly on the leather diary, as if the rhythm might keep her calm. I stared at the last page we'd read, the words echoing in my head. "If you find this, look for the key." Finally, I broke the silence. "Lila, where did you find that box?" "In the back of the closet in that room," she murmured. "Behind some old blankets, like someone shoved it there and forgot about it. Or didn't want it to be found," I said quietly. She looked up, eyes sharp. "You think my father put it there?" I hesitated. "I think your mother didn't trust him. And if she hid a key, it's because she knew he might try to destroy whatever it opened." Lila stared at the box like it might speak if she glared long enough. "There was nothing else in there," she said, shaking her head. "Just the diary, the letters, the photos." "Wait," I cut her off. "The photos. Show me." She opened the box again, spreading out a handful of glossy prints. Most were old, faded Polaroids of Lila as a child, pictures of her mother smiling softly at the camera. a few stiff portraits of Richard that looked more like business headshots than family photos. And then I saw it, an image that didn't fit. A picture of an antique writing desk, its surface scratched and covered in papers. The angle was odd, like it had been taken in secret. "Where's this desk?" I asked, holding up the photo. Lila frowned. "I've never seen it before." "Are you sure? It could be in storage? Or maybe the attic?" She shook her head. "My father doesn't keep anything in the attic. He says it's too old, too unstable." My pulse quickened. A desk, a hidden key, a warning written in frantic ink. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't supposed to find this. We searched the house for the desk, moving from room to room, whispering even though we were alone. The living room, nothing. The dining room, nothing. Finally, we found a door I hadn't noticed before. Narrow, tucked behind a coat rack in the hallway. "What's this?" I asked. Lila hesitated. I don't know." She turned the knob. It groaned as it opened. A steep staircase stretched upward into darkness. "The attic," she whispered. The air grew colder as we climbed. Dust clung to the walls, and the wood creaked beneath each step. When we reached the top, I clicked on my phone flashlight. The beam cut through the shadows, revealing a cramped, low-ceilinged space filled with forgotten things. Old furniture draped in sheets, boxes stacked high, the faint smell of mothballs. And there it was, the desk. It looked exactly like the photo, scratched, faded, and somehow waiting. Lila approached it slowly, as if afraid it might vanish if she got too close. She tugged at the drawers. Most opened easily, filled with yellowed papers, cracked pens, nothing unusual. But one drawer wouldn't budge. She pulled harder. It stayed stuck. "This one's locked," she said. I crouched down, running my fingers along the underside. That's when I felt it. A small, square piece of metal taped to the wood. I peeled the tape away and held it up. A key. Lila's breath caught. She took it from my hand, her fingers trembling as she slid it into the drawer's lock. Clicked open. Inside was a single envelope, thick and heavy. Her mother's handwriting scrawled across the front. "For Lila. If he finds this, burn it." Lila just stared at it for a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Are you going to open it?" I asked gently. She nodded, slowly tearing it open. Inside were several folded documents and photographs. I saw her expression change as she flipped through them. First confusion, then horror. "Lila, what is it?" She turned the papers toward me. Bank statements, property transfers, and then something worse. A signed confession from her father's former business partner, implicating Richard in illegal deals, bribery, even threats of violence to keep people quiet. "This is," I whispered, barely able to process it. "This could ruin him." She pulled out the last item, an old, yellowed police report. The words on it made my stomach twist. Domestic disturbance, Bennett residence. Her mother had filed it. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Lila's hands shook as she clutched the papers, tears welling in her eyes. "All these years," she whispered. "He told me she died because she was sick, that she couldn't handle things. But this," her voice broke. I stepped closer, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Lila," I said softly, "your mother didn't just leave you memories. She left you the truth." She looked up at me, her eyes wet and raw. For the first time that night, she let herself cry. Not the quiet, held-back tears of someone trying to stay strong, but the kind that tear you apart as they leave. I held her as she cried, feeling the weight of everything. The diary, the secrets, the dangerous man who was her father. Downstairs, her phone buzzed again. Neither of us moved to answer it, because for the first time that night, we weren't just uncovering her family's secrets. We were deciding what to do with them. The truth sat between us, heavy and fragile. But in that fragile space, something unexpected grew. Something that felt like trust. And maybe more than that. The attic felt colder after we opened that drawer. Like the house itself understood that a line had been crossed. Lila wiped her tears with the back of her hand. her face pale but her jaw set in a way I hadn't seen before. "We can't keep this here," she said, holding the envelope tightly. "If my father comes back and sees it." "He can't," I cut in gently, "because if he does, he'll destroy it." Lila's grip on the papers tightened. "Ethan, what if he already did something to her? What if these papers are the reason she's gone?" I didn't have an answer. We went back down to the kitchen, sitting at the same counter where just an hour earlier, she'd handed me the diary. Now the evidence lay between us, photographs, documents, that final police report. "Do you realize what this is?" I asked softly. She nodded, staring at the pages like they might burn holes in the counter. "It's my father's undoing. And your safety," I added. Her eyes snapped to mine. "What do you mean?" I hesitated before answering. "Lila, if everything here is true, if he's covered up crimes, if your mom tried to warn you, he might do anything to keep this buried. Even now." The words felt heavy as I spoke them, because I believed them. Her phone buzzed again. We both froze. This time, she flipped it over. Richard Bennett's name glared on the screen. She didn't answer. The buzzing stopped. Then, a new sound, a text notification. She unlocked the phone, and I saw it too. "Where are you? Why are the lights on?" My stomach dropped. "He has cameras outside," she whispered. "He knows I'm not alone." The room went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "You need to leave," she said suddenly, her voice sharp with panic. "If he finds you here." "No." The word came out more forcefully than I intended. "I'm not leaving you in this alone, Lila. Not tonight." She stared at me for a long moment, and something in her face softened. I picked up the envelope again, thumbing through the pages. "We have two choices," I said. "Hide these, or take them somewhere safe before he gets back." Lila shook her head slowly. "No hiding. Not anymore." Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor under it, like courage wrapped around fear. We made copies. Every page, every photo. I scanned them on the old office printer Richard probably hadn't touched in years. By the time we were done, there were two sets of truth. One for Lila to keep and one we hid in my bag. Insurance. When I finally looked up, the clock read 3:12 a.m. We were exhausted, drained, but there was something between us now that hadn't been there before. Not just the shared secret, something gentler. She poured us each a glass of water, and for a long moment we didn't speak. The house was quiet again, but the kind of quiet that feels earned, like the storm had passed, even if more was coming. Finally, she broke the silence. "Do you think she'd be proud of me?" "Your mom?" I asked. She nodded, her eyes shiny but clear. I looked at the diary on the counter, the pages worn but still holding her words. "Yes," I said simply. "Because you listened. Because you didn't look away." When I left her house as the sun began to edge over the horizon, the sky was the pale color of healing. Soft pinks, fading blues. Lila stood in the doorway, the diary clutched to her chest, the weight of her mother's secrets and her father's shadow still heavy, but not crushing. "Ethan," she said quietly, "thank you." I wanted to tell her so many things in that moment, that I wasn't just there because she called, that I would have come even if she hadn't, that somehow, in the middle of all this darkness, I felt something for her that terrified and anchored me. But I didn't. I just nodded, and we both understood there would be more to say later. I drove away with the second envelope on the passenger seat, knowing that what we'd uncovered wasn't just about exposing a man. It was about freeing a woman's voice that had been silenced for too long. And in the middle of it all, I realized something I'll never forget. Sometimes the people who need you the most aren't the ones who ask for help with words. They ask by showing you a locked drawer, a hidden diary, a secret they can't bear alone. And if you're lucky, if you're brave, you don't just see the secret. You see them,